Hello, everyone, and welcome to the first episode in. I don't even know what to call this series, honestly. This is. As I mentioned in the previous video, I was challenged by a viewer who happens to be Aladdin, who, for those of you that are aware, is a longtime member of the channel. So, and he offered a rather interesting challenge. Now, for those of you that are aware of our interests, or rather are not aware of our interests, we are both fans of a show called Avatar: The Last Airbender. And I'm sure a lot of you are aware of this show. And I asked him to give me a specific. I was the one to initiate the challenge, but I asked him to give me a challenge to create either a ride or an attraction that has never been built before, or at least it is not doesn't already exist in some form around the world. So he gave me this challenge. Avatar: The Last Airbender is the theme of the ride, which will be fascinating to figure out. I've already got a rough storyline in my head, and I'll kind of describe it as we go along. And he also gave me a ride system. Now, this ride system is kind of partially based off of what I showed last time in regards to the roller coaster prototype. However, he decided to give me a bit of a added challenge to that. The ride is not just a roller coaster. He gave me the challenge of doing what I think of in my head as a dual ride system, which means that you've got two ride systems working in tandem in order to create a full effect or a full attraction. And I had to get some clarification from him in regards to what he meant by part of it. But the two ride attractions are the roller coaster and what I think of as the Kuka arm attractions. Now, before you go and think, oh, he means the giant arm that like has a C at the end of it that just kind of stays in place and rotates around. Well, kind of. Think more of what you find at the Hogwarts experience, Harry Potter and the Forbidden Journey. That was the name of the ride. I was going blank on it. Where you're seated at the end of an arm, and the arm is moving along a track, on top of it doing all the funky things. Very similar to what you can find in, say, Roller Coaster Tycoon 3. You could actually find something like that, but also Planet Coaster. You can find that in one of the packs. I don't remember which one off the top of my head. Where it's a arm that has seats on the end of it, and it's like an industrial robotics arm, and it's moving along a track. Now, I had to get some clarification on this. He meant that there's a roller coaster section and then also a section where you're on the robotic arm, all within one ride. And it took me a few moments to think about this, and I finally came up with a bit of a weird idea, which is, and I don't wish I had some like proper visual aids right here with me as I'm explaining this, but if I'm smart, while I'm editing this, I will put up some visual aids for you guys. The first thought that occurred to me, okay, how are we going to do this? We need some sort of method of getting around. Well, let's just go back to the show at the very beginning. What do they get around on? They get around on ATLA, which is the sky-bison, if I remember correctly. I will admit, it's been a long time since I've seen the show, so I might get one or two of the species names wrong, so I very much apologize. But they ride around on Abba's back, specifically in this little kind of carriage. I don't remember if it's ever explained why he has it on his back, but essentially that. And I'm thinking about this, thinking, okay, we have what is going to be the ride vehicle. Now, how do we figure out storyline? And how does that tie into the attraction experience, which is essentially going to be kind of a more exhilarating attraction experience, because we've got roller coaster and the roving arms. And I thought, okay, what could possibly be exhilarating throughout the show? Well, you've got their fights with the Fire Nation. You've got some stuff in regards to Ba Sing Se, actually, which is the Earth, yeah, the Earth Nation's capital. And then my brain jumped to something completely and totally different, which is there's a grand total of one episode where you get to see Aang's home, or at least what would be very similar to Aang's home, which is a air temple. And my brain thought to that and thought, okay, we never really get to see them, and they're supposed to be like supposedly scattered around the world, but you never get to see them because they're essentially dead for all intents and purposes. So how do we deal with that? Well, we can use that as our location. Okay, so let's say we're using an air temple as our location. Why are we in the temple location? Well, let's say, and again, this is mostly just my brain like throwing things out, and this is genuinely how I go about doing this. So we have our setting. We've got air temple. We've got our ride vehicle. We've got the carriage on Abba's back. What is the exhilarating part of this? Well, and why are we there? Well, let's say it's at the end of the show, because we don't really know a whole lot past world peace kind of thing, until you skip like essentially 2 generations and we get straight to Legend of Korra. But we don't know what happens immediately after the final episode. Well, let's say that I know my brain just jumps from weird things to weird things. Let's say Aang has decided to try and reinvigorate the air temples. Okay, how do we do that? He's running a tourist attraction. So this is how I envisioned this going. Okay, sorry, we are tourists coming to check out an air temple. Aang is running these like tours through the air temple. Okay. Why is it being exhilarating? Well, the air temple is kind of cramped and Abba's kind of big. So, how do we get this? Naturally, he would have to do some weird kind of maneuvers in order to get around the temple. Okay, what is some of the more exhilarating parts? And this is where my brain chose 2 things. One, the temple starts crumbling around them, which doesn't really work out very well for the storyline if you want to keep rewriting the ride. If you keep getting attacked every single time, doesn't make sense. Or keeps crumbling around you. Sorry, my brain jumped to the second one, which is that you get attacked by Fire Nation loyalists that were loyal to the cause of the Emperor, and even after the Emperor's been dethroned, they still want to go back to the Fire Nation being, like, essentially the head honcho, if you will. So that's how my brain thought through this. And I'm still trying to figure out which I want to do. And I still haven't figured it out, to be entirely honest. So we'll kind of figure that out once we get to that section. And that section is going to actually be the robotic arm section. And I'll have an explanation on why we're suddenly changing over to kind of this robotic arm. Don't worry. But before we get into any of that, we need to figure out a ride path. And that's where we start off right here. We are going to figure out a ride path. And this is something that I don't even remember the last time I got to design a ride path, honestly. So you'll get to kind of see what the steps are that are taken in this sort of a situation. Well, let's start at the very beginning. Where where are we? What is the storyline? We are currently at a station, loading onto Alba's back. Okay, so we have. I should probably use different marker blocks. Let's just go with this. And I'll also be kind of figuring out the individual blocks along the ride track. So we've got our station. We have our dispatch. We have our load. And we have our unload all over here. And I'm probably going to have a couple of standbys. So that's for... Oh, my brain is not going to be happy if I leave it like that at all. There. Okay, so unload. Hold one or hold two, hold one. Load, dispatch. Okay, so now we've got that. And this is, I have not got anything written down, so this is literally me going through the entire process. So for those of you that have never like designed a ride track before, this will be an interesting experience for you. So from there, where do we go? Okay, we need to somehow get to the air temple. Because assumably we would not actually start at the air temple. So we need to go out a small bit. Oh dear. And the first part is going to be the roller coaster. So we would need to somehow have some sort of propulsion. Well, thankfully, there's a really cool thing, which is the fact that the air temples are normally high up in the mountains, which means that that is a great way of disguising our chain lift. So here's our chain lift, and this may not be straight. It might change a small bit, but there it is. It's straight now. And obviously we're going to have a block section there. And we might actually have a standby for the chain lift as well, but we'll figure it out later. So now we are in the air temple. Well, where do we go from here? So, and we don't really know what the air temples in general look like. We have a vague idea from the show, but we don't really know what their architecture style really look like. But I'm going to go off of general, like, Buddhist temples to some degree. And I will admit, I'm not Buddhist. I've never been to a Buddhist temple. And I know that it's not stated it's a Buddhist temple. But a lot of the ideas from the show were based around Buddhism. Oh gosh, I can't think of half of the terms that I want to be thinking of. But Tai Chi. There we go. That's the word I was looking for. Tai Chi. Mixed martial arts. Stuff like that. So we would probably be looking at that kind of an architecture. So generally, when you find that kind of thing, you would have a entryway and then a big hall. Generically, you would find a open pavilion. Probably it would be after a couple of doorways, but you'd be in an open pavilion, and that would be the first real big area that you're going to be in. Because that's the open pavilions are typically kind of like the main. Main rooms are not a good way of describing them, but they're essentially like the gathering places, I suppose, is a better way of describing it. From what I understand, I'm not Buddhist. I'll admit I've never taken a in-life tour of a Buddhist temple, but I've seen multiple videos covering it, specifically the temples where monks actually train. So that's generally what I'm basing it off of. So we would go through here, probably do kind of like a bunny hill type thing here, and we would turn off, going into kind of a main room. And we would probably spiral upwards a small bit, just so that we could get a better view of the big pavilion, and then head out through another doorway. curve out here. Probably do a underpass curve right about here. Oh, Jesus. And I know that that's not actually what the heights are going to be like, but it's a great way of kind of describing that it's supposed to be kind of going under. So go out, go through some close quarters, so we would probably be doing a couple spirals, sorry, corkscrews, probably some, maybe one or two S-curves. And then probably roughly around here is where we transition from the roller coaster segment into the roving arm segment. So let's denote that with a different block. So here we go. So, and I'm actually going to do something slightly different. Is I'm going to indicate that this is for swap over, and this is the robotic arm track. Now, what's kind of nice about these sort of track types is that you don't have to do these really weird sort of curves and all that kind of stuff. You don't. In fact, the ride path, if you look at the ride path for, say, Harry Potter's Forbidden Journey, it's actually a very, very, very basic ride path. It's just a bunch of straight lines. Because a lot of the crazier movements that occur in the ride is actually just being done by the robotic arm. So as you can see, it looks a bit more kind of a basic ride path. And actually, probably would not want to go that close. No, I don't have... There we go. Alright, so there's a rough ride track, and you'll notice that I made it a whole loop. That's because the arms need to keep cycling, because theoretically it's going to be set up in such a way that you'll have multiple ride arms all able to run at the same time. Now, it wouldn't be a continuous operation, but there would be a setup in place such that you would have maybe one or two spare ride arms around here standing by in order to take over after this one gets dispatched. And I say dispatched because it's not really dispatched, but gets the okay to start moving, and it goes on its merry way. And then once it gets here, the ride car unloads, and it goes back to the station. And I'm most likely going to have the split off for the car storage, or the car barn, if you so will, to be here. Because it just makes it really easy to go ahead and just have it right there. And I'll probably actually have it be kind of a Y so that you can bring it back, all the cars back into play if you want. Actually, no, it would have to back up and then go in. Never mind. I can't. Brain. So this is the general ride path that I'm thinking about. So we'll actually want to have a block break there because we need something right before, in case this gets delayed for whatever reason. Curve around here. I'm wanting to do a like a launch section, so that's probably going to be right about here. So it kind of launches itself down the corridor, comes around, spirals, does kind of a wavy thing through the halls, around here, and then we get to there's trouble, and Aang has to take over. So there you go. There is a ride path for us to work off of. And let me get a nice good view of it. Nice. So you can see that it's going to be a moderately big, well, not moderately big, but it's going to be kind of a close quarters ride system, it looks like, which is not quite what I intended, but I'm sure that we can easily deal with it as needed.